Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham. I am the president and founder of Accepted, and I'm going to be presenting the GMAT Low Scores Retaking and Strategies for Success. First, a little bit about me. As I said, I'm the founder of Accepted. I've been an MBA admissions consultant since 1994. I've been quoted in Poets and Quants, Business Because, the Wall Street Journal, US News, CBS News, Business Week, and others regarding MBA admissions. I'm also the co-author of MBA Admissions for Smarties. I'm the co-founder and was the first president of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. And I'm looking forward to sharing my 25 years of admissions experience with you. Before we begin, I wanted to mention a few to-dos that will help you maximize your time here today, and one that will help us improve the webinars for the future. First, if you have not yet downloaded your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so. My personal recommendation is that you not only download it, but you print that out and use it to take notes. If you prefer to do that digitally, of course, you can do that too. You can find it in your control panel under the handout section. It's just a link, click on the link, it'll open up a window, and again, my suggestion is that you print it out. I'm going to ask questions during the course of the webinar, and I'm going to ask you also to raise your hands in response to some of them. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon, two icons underneath the horizontal orange arrow on your control panel. If I ask a question that's a more open-ended question that's not about hand raising, then please respond in the question window. We're going to use the question window for both your questions and your answers. And if you have a question, I encourage you to post it at any point in time. We'll take questions at the end, but post it whenever you have it. Now, when you leave, you're going to receive a brief survey. It really will take you a minute or two to fill out. Please do so. We value your feedback. I read all the feedback. As a matter of fact, this webinar is a direct result of feedback that we received from webinar participants in the past. And now for the fun stuff, you can win. We will have a contest towards the end of the webinar based solely on content presented during the webinar. You can win a free consultation with me. Stay tuned for details and, of course, the question. Now, I'd like to test your hand-raising skill. Please raise your hand if you want to go to business school to enhance your professional opportunities and or pursue your dream career. Okay, well, most of you are here for the right reason and have figured out how to raise your hand. Okay, next question, also a hand-raising one. Please raise your hand if you're concerned that your GMAT or GRE score will prevent you from getting into your top choice schools and hamper or prevent you from pursuing that dream career. Okay, again, most of you both have figured out how to raise your hand and are here for the right reasons. That's exactly what we're going to discuss. You're not alone if you're concerned about your test score. That score and your GPA are usually among the biggest concerns applicants have. And that's exactly what I'm going to address as we move forward with the presentation. I've left plenty of time for questions at the end, as I mentioned. So if you have a question, just put it in the question window, and then we'll get to it at the end. Now, before we start, I'd like to learn a little bit about my audience. Where are you geographically, and where are you at in terms of the GMAT? Where are you logging in from? City and state in the United States, city and country if you're outside the United States. In the question window, please. Nobody wants to share where they're logging in from? Ah, okay, New York City, welcome. I understand it's pretty cold there now for May. Anybody else? Anybody from outside the United States? Islamabad, Colombia, Chennai, another person in India, wonderful. Baltimore, Maryland. Okay, great, very good. I'm sure there are other locations too, but I'm in Los Angeles. So anybody, I guess nobody's here from California. It seems like we also have a very international crowd today. All right, I'd like to know, I'm going to pose a poll now. You're going to see it on the window. Here you go. And the question is, how many times have you taken the GMAT so far? Once, twice, or 3 or more times? Probably should have had a 0 there too, but I didn't. Again, the options are once, twice, 3 or more times. With 58% having voted, can we get a little bit higher? Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and show the results. 75% of you have taken it once. 13% have taken it twice. And 13% have taken it 3+ times. Okay, so about a fourth of you have taken it 2 or more times. All right, that's fine. And then which statement here do you most identify with? I took the GMAT and bombed it, and I'm planning to retake. I took the GMAT, and I'm not sure if I should retake. Okay, again, the options are took the GMAT and bombed it, and I'm planning to retake. Took the GMAT, and I'm not sure if I should retake. We're at 50% having voted. Can we get it up again? Let's see. 5, 4, some of you probably haven't taken it yet. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, with 67% having voted. Here are the results. 50-50. Okay. All right, so you're pretty evenly divided on whether you should retake it or not. That's a subject that we're definitely going to address. Okay. Most of you are here because you took and aren't happy with your GMAT score on some level, some on a deeper level than others. Let's see if I can help you shed some light on the role of the test score in MBA admissions and whether you should retake it or not. This focus of the webinar, as I've said all along, will be the GMAT, but I'm also going to reference the GRE. So if you took the GRE, this still is a relevant webinar for you. Let's do a little myth busting about the GMAT. What are the most common myths that you hear? Yeah, somebody is here who hasn't taken the GMAT. What are the most common myths that you hear about the role of the GMAT in MBA admissions? In the question window, please. What are some of the most common myths that you hear about the role of the GMAT in MBA admissions? Nobody hears any myths? All right, then I'll tell you two that I commonly hear. 1, the GMAT is everything in MBA admissions. Get a high score and you are guaranteed in. Okay, now we're getting some. Thank you. Thank you, Mubashir. The GMAT is the most important component of the application. It can make or break the case for you. Okay, that's pretty close to what I just said. So we're on the same page. I'm going to address that a little bit later on. I do believe that it is a myth, and I'll tell you why later on. So the second myth that I sometimes hear, it's a little bit less common, I think, than the first one is, but here it is. Since MBA admissions is holistic, I really don't need to worry about my GMAT score or GRE score since I have high grades and great experience. That's equally false. Let's deal with some facts, okay? The GMAT is the one element that is a constant among all applicants except for GRE takers, and there's a large enough pool of GRE takers where essentially you have the same thing. You have two systems that are somewhat similar that allow schools to compare you. Schools and grading systems can differ enormously. They differ by country, they differ within a country, and frankly, both testing and grading can even differ on the same campus, just among professors and TAs for that matter. Academic quality can obviously vary from school to school. The GMAT is a constant. Another fact that's important to know, the GMAT score correlates well to success in the first year of business school. And that's one of the reasons it has the importance that it does have, and it is important. There's no question about that. It correlates well to success in the first year of business school, but it is not a measure of self-worth. It's not predictive of success later in life. It doesn't say how much money you're going to make. It doesn't say what kind of a nice person you are. It's not an intelligence test. All it does correlate well to success in the first year of business school. The GMAT is also used by applicants admissions offices and some rankings, US News in particular, as a measure of student quality or ability. And I'm not saying that's right, and GMAC would probably say actually that it's wrong. But it is a reality that many, many, many stakeholders in the business school world use the GMAT score or the average GMAT score for a class as a proxy for quality. Now, US News, one of the most influential rankings in the world, includes it as a factor in its rankings. Actually, it's 16.25% of its rankings. Now, and if you look here on your screen right now, the higher ranked schools, which have the lower numbers, are almost all also have the highest average GMAT scores. So there's a strong correlation between US News ranking and GMAT score. And I think that certainly in the US News is one of the most, if the most influential of the rankings. Is the GMAT the most important element in your application, which Mubashir correctly identified as a myth? Yes, no, maybe would be my answer. It is always important, but it is not the most important. It can keep you out, but at top schools, it will rarely get you in. Very rarely. I actually don't think ever. It can also be a significant factor in determining if you are awarded merit aid. And there's no question that it is an important element in the application, but it's not the only important element. Schools aren't lying when they say the process is holistic. Now, I got a question for you, and I'd like you to raise your hand in response. Let me just make sure all hands are down. How many of you think the quant section is all that really matters on the GMAT? How many of you think the quant section is all that really matters on the GMAT? All right, we got 7% for the quant. How many of you think that the verbal section is all that really matters on the GMAT? 7%. And how many of you think that both the verbal and quant are important? Okay, how many of you think that both the verbal and quant are important? All right, and there we get 46%. Well, I'm with you. Both the verbal and the quant are important. They're very important. Schools want students who can both add and subtract and talk. They want people who can calculate and communicate. Not only that the schools want it, but employers want it. I'm constantly seeing articles about the importance of soft skills, and I've seen this in GMAC data also, the importance of soft skills as a differentiator for recruiters. And actually, if you take a look at the interview I did with Kevin Bevins of Bain & Company, you'll see that he emphasized the soft skills very much as an important factor in Bain's recruiting and hiring. Rachel, can you post the link to that that interview? You can do it later if you want, but you should do it. So you have to take the GMAT, and you know that both sections are important. What can you do about the GMAT? I know that there's at least one person here who hasn't taken it yet. Some of you are planning to take it again. If you haven't taken it, you need to study your tail off to do the best you can. As you can see on the screen, there's a strong correlation between the number of hours spent studying and preparing for the GMAT and the score that you're going to get. Furthermore, the GMAT is an element of your qualifications and your record that you can still influence through study. Now, I know some people will study very hard and they still won't move the needle on the GMAT. I realize that that's a reality. But for those of you who maybe didn't study that hard or tried study on your own and still didn't get the score you wanted, then up your game, change something about your prep. If you studied on your own, try doing an online class. If you did an online class, perhaps a traditional class will help you more. Perhaps a tutor is what you need. But put in the time and effort. If you put in the time and effort and it didn't work, you didn't get the score you wanted, and you tried multiple times, we'll get to that later in the webinar. I understand that's possible. But for those of you who haven't, realize this is something you can probably influence, and you should try. Most people can benefit from a course, but they're not mandatory. And you can check with your friends, the GMAT club, beat the GMAT to determine the best approach for you. But whatever you do, don't take the GMAT on a lark. Prepare, because chance favors the prepared mind. One of the most common questions I'm asked as an MBA admissions consultant is, what are my chances? Well, chance favors the prepared mind. Prepare for your GMAT exam. Now, in addition to just studying the material and learning how the GMAT works and the more conventional understanding of GMAT prep, I'd also suggest that you go into the test score having reviewed GMAC's score cancel policy. You need to know it for test day. As you can see, you can cancel the GMAT score at the testing center within 2 minutes of seeing the score at zero cost. You can cancel it for up to 72 hours for a $25 fee, and you can reinstate it for almost the entire period that is valid, 4 years and 11 months, for a $50 fee. So there is relatively little downside in canceling. And I would also say, because you can always reinstate for in the context of an MBA, a fairly reasonable fee. Now, and I would also encourage you, these policies tend to change. So before you go in for the exam, know what the policy is when you're taking it. ETS also has a score select policy, so you can choose which tests you want to report to your target schools. Fees may apply, and again, check with ETS when you go for it. Now, I suggest you go into the GMAT exam with a cancel score in mind, both for the total and the test components. And if you have any doubts, cancel. You can always reinstate. And you have maximum flexibility if you cancel. But if you get the score you want, then just accept it. And you have to know what that score will be. Now, what should be your cancel score? Or if you accepted a score, should you now retake? I would suggest that here is something absolutely critical. You need to evaluate your score in context. Now, what does context mean? Because context is king in this business. First of all, I like to use the percentiles more than the raw scores, but the goal here is that for your top MBA programs, you ideally want to get over the 80th percentile on each section of the GMAT. And that will probably apply to the IR at some point, but not yet. Now, this 80th percentile is not an ironclad rule. It's not like if you don't get 80th percentile, you're out. And if you do, you're in. Again, this is holistic. But just for informational purposes, the 80th percentile on the verbal is a 36. The 80th percentile on a quant is roughly a 49. And ideally, you want to be above that if you're applying to top MBA programs. The total, by the way, for the 80th percentile is 670, which is significantly below where most top MBA programs are at in terms of their average GMAT score. So this is not a crazy, I think the tough part is getting the 80th percentile on both. Now, the GMAT score isn't looked at in a vacuum. And if context is king, what makes up the context? Okay. The context consists of two things: the schools you're applying to and you. Those are the two primary elements you have to keep in mind. The rest of your profile, the other elements that you're bringing to the table, and the schools you're applying to. So in terms of what do I mean by context in the school arena? What is the average GMAT or GRE score, and the 25th to 70th percentiles, or the 20th to 80th percentile, depends on what the school posts, for your target programs. You really want to be above that lower number, and you want to be ideally above the average number if your grades are low. The other part is the rest of your profile. Are you from an overrepresented group that usually does well on the GMAT, or the opposite? If you're from that overrepresented group, you really want to have an above average score. What does your transcript say about your academic ability? If your transcript says you're a high performer and you do well on the GMAT, academically, you're doing great. That's also part of the equation. If your transcript shows you as a poor academic performer and your GMAT reinforces that impression, You got a problem. What does your work experience say about your quantitative and communications ability? Another question. The answer to those questions determine the context for you, for your qualifications. Now, what I'd like to do is look more at this question of context. I'd like you folks to put on your MBA admissions consultant hat, and let's go through a few case studies. I'm going to be asking you to share your views on several things here, okay? Now, here's, and I've made up the examples, by the way, they're not real people. Let's meet Joe. Joe is applying to several programs with an average GMAT scores of between 660 and 680. His score is a 680 and balanced. His work experience is competitive and his GPA is a 3.4 and in line with the average GPA at his target programs, perhaps even a little above. Should Joe retake? Here's your poll. What do you think? Should Joe retake? Yes, no, what do you think? 5, 4, with 67% having voted. Can we get it above that? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll, share the results with 73% having voted. 27% said yes, Joe should retake, and 73% said no, Joe shouldn't retake. And I firmly agree with the majority here. Joe's scores are in line with the schools, the average scores of the schools he wants to get into. He's a competitive applicant at these schools. You could say, what about work experience, community service, all that, but let's assume that those are all in line. He is a competitive applicant, and there's no need for him, if he's happy with the schools he's aiming for, to try and raise his score. Now, let's take another look at another fellow, okay? Meet Ajay. Ajay is from an overrepresented group. He came to the US from India as a teen. He went to a public Ivy and earned a 3.3 GPA. He has, whoops, let's go back. Let me hide this. He went to public Ivy and earned a 3.3 GPA. He has some leadership and community service, but nothing extraordinary. He is a programmer by profession. He's been out of work for 3 years. Out of college for 3 years, rather. Now, he's applying to an MBA program with an average GMAT of 710. His GMAT is 680, and his quant score percentile was 65th percentile. Should he retake? And here's the poll for that. Should Ajay retake? Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. With 75% having voted, here are the results. 83% say yes, he should retake. 17% say no, he should not retake. Again, you're a great audience, at least when you agree with me. I completely agree with the majority here. And you have to look at whether your GMAT or reinforces the impression made by the your transcript or contradicts it. And in this case, Ajay, his grades were not, they were okay, but they weren't fantastic. And his score is just not fantastic. And he's from this overrepresented group that normally does extremely well on the GMAT. I strongly feel he should retake. And for you, the takeaway for you folks, if your grades are strong and your GMAT is high, great, you're done. Put a check mark next to GMAT. If your grades are below average and your GMAT is above average for the schools that you are applying to, then maybe you are really going to do great in business school, but just had a tough time in college. What's the context? Did you work to support yourself through college? Did you get sick at some point and have a dip in your grades during that illness? Was there family illness? Perhaps you were just immature. A lot of 18-year-olds are immature. There's no shame in that. And if you had an upward trend in your grades, well, that GPA is going to look a whole lot better. Let the admissions committee know the context that caused your grades to dip or start slow or whatever it was. See if you can demonstrate that you now know how to apply yourself academically by taking business-related courses and acing them. And combine that with your high GMAT, and you may succeed in giving the schools the confidence that you have the academic ability to do well in business school. Still, you got the GMAT score you wanted, you're finished with the GMAT. If your grades are high and your GMAT is below average for your target programs, can you retake? The best way to address a low GMAT is to do well the next time around. Most schools use the highest GMAT score in their evaluation if you didn't cancel scores. And of course, you can now cancel scores that don't represent your ability. Now, if the highest score that you get, so you take it multiple times, and it does happen. Again, I've been doing this for 25 years. We definitely have had clients who've taken the scores twice, 3 times, but I'll tell you a happy story a little bit later about taking it a 3rd time. And they just can't raise their score. It does happen. Perhaps you can at least show that you've tried to raise it or have raised it somewhat through effort and determination. I'm not suggesting 20 retakes. I do think that, well, we're going to get into that in a minute in terms of who should retake, a 3rd or even a 4th time. I want you also to note that 2 people with identical GMAT score can get very different advice from you and from me. Again, you have to evaluate your score in context, and the 2 critical elements of context are the schools you are applying to and the other elements of your profile. All right, let's go back to playing admissions consultant with 2 more cases. Jane, meet Jane. She has a 3.5 GPA with an undergrad in communications from a good public university. She has worked in not-for-profit fundraising since college. She really wants to go to Haas, UC Berkeley's Haas School, which has an average GMAT for accepted applicants of 726 and an average undergrad for accepted applicants of 3.66. That's for the class that entered in 2018. The mid 80th percentile for the GMAT is 690 to 750. Now, her past activism shows that she really identifies with Haas's 4 principles, but she's going to struggle to show she is competitive. Jane earned a balanced 670 the first time around. She retook, and her verbal score went up, but her quant is still around a 65th percentile. And her overall is at about 700. Now, she studied really hard, and her practice exams are all in the 720, 740 range. The second time she was taking the exam, she was developing a migraine during the quant section. Should Jane retake? And here's the poll. Should Jane retake? Yes, no. We don't even have a maybe in there. Okay, with 73% having voted, can we get it up? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll. Whoa, 50-50 split. 80% having voted. We finally got over 80%. You're a good audience. Thank you. 50-50 split on whether Jane should retake. Well, obviously, she's going to have to do one or the other. I personally think that Jane should retake. She needs to show that she can handle the quant. Her current score doesn't quite give that confidence, especially since it's going to be combined with her non-quantitative undergrad. And I would encourage her that because she wants to avoid applying to a program like Haas with a below average GPA and GMAT, remember Haas has a 15.4% acceptance rate for 2018, and that means it has an 85% rejection rate. It rejects 7 out of 8 applicants. So Haas can be really choosy, and I would encourage her to retake. The other reason I would encourage her to retake is that her practice scores were telling her that she can do better. And there were extenuating circumstances that developing migraine that caused her to stumble, that could have contributed to her doing poorly during that quant section of the exam. So I would encourage her to retake. Now, for those of you who have retaken it, and those have taken the exams 2 or more time, which is, I think, about a fourth of you, if I remember the results. Yeah, it was about a fourth of you. If the score didn't get to where you want it to be, is there other evidence that you can do well despite the low GMAT? That could be your demanding job. Was your college a particularly rigorous program? Were your grades out excellent? Did you take a lot of quant classes? Were there extenuating circumstances, in other words, changeable ones that affected your score? If there were, Even if this is a third time, you may want to consider a fourth try, certainly if a second time. Were you doing better on practice exams and in this second, third test attempt? And could you change or improve your test prep approach? I mentioned earlier, going from self-study to a course or a course to a tutor. I want to tell you a little story. We have some family friends, and their son applied this year to business school. A year ago, he contacted me. This was like last winter, fall. It would be, like 2017, early 2018. And he told me what he's doing, and I gave him some free advice, obviously. And he decided to go with the GRE, and he, like most applicants, has some strong points and some weak points. He decided to go with the GRE, and he was working with a tutor. He knew he needed to get his quant score up. And he'd taken it once, and he wasn't satisfied with the score. So I said he was doing the right thing. We had a great call, and all was good. I said, let me know how you do on the GRE. So next time he calls me, I happen to be standing in this ridiculous line in the airport, fuming. And I don't like lines like most people. And he's on the call with me. And he says, listen, Linda, I didn't get the score I wanted, and I'm really debating whether I should retake a third time or not. I'm sick of studying. And he told me his score. I don't remember what it was, but whatever it was, I really felt, I said, how are you doing on practice exams? He said he was scoring higher, and he really felt he knew the material, but he just didn't produce on test day. And he felt his timing was off, and he took, that messed him up. I said, and I encouraged him to retake. And he kind of hemmed and hawed, and finally he said, I have some relationships. I'm not sure my relationships are going to be so happy if I continue studying. And I said, well, I can't give you relationship advice, but I'm giving you admissions advice. And my admissions advice is to prepare again and retake. And he reluctantly said, okay, thank you. And I got an email after I got out of the line a couple of days later that he was indeed going to retake. And I was much happier talking to him and helping him in that, than just fuming in the line. So he did retake, and the third time, and we also agreed that if he got the same score the third time around, he was done. He wasn't going to put himself through this a fourth time. So the third time was a charm for him. He got the score he wanted. He worked with us this year on his applications, and he's actually going to an Ivy League MBA program that he wouldn't even have applied to. But the nicest part of this story is he was visiting in Los Angeles last summer and called me and says, can I come over and discuss MBA admissions with you? And I said, yeah, sure. So again, close family friend of my son from childhood. And I said, sure, come on over. And I said, I invited him to dinner. And the night before he was supposed to come, I happened to be speaking to his mom unexpectedly, and he said that their son got engaged. The same son got engaged. So we actually had a little bit of an engagement party for the guy, and I'm going to his wedding in 2 weeks. So that's a little bit of an aside. The bottom line is he took the test, he got the girl, and he got the school. All right, last case study, May. May is struggling with the GMAT, especially the verbal portion. She has taken the test 3 times, preparing endlessly before each exam with different test prep approaches. Her scores have been 680, 700, and 670. She felt good each time she went to take the exam, and her practice scores have been in the mid to upper 600s. Once or twice, she got into low 700s. Now, she worked as a financial analyst in China and in San Francisco. She earned her undergraduate degree from Michigan Business School and earned a 3.4. She has little community service, but she was a violin virtuoso growing up and even played in her university orchestra. She would like to attend Wharton, Booth, Columbia, or NYU Stern. Now, Wharton, Booth, and Columbia, their GMAT scores are over 730. Stern's average GMAT score is in the 720s, I believe. Should, may, retake. And here's the poll. Again, should, may, retake, yes, no. With 71% having voted, anybody else want to express an opinion here? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So we have 50% yes, 50% no. Again, a tie. We have a lot of ties today, and I've never experienced that so much. All right. I would encourage May not to retake. If you've taken the GMAT 3 to 5 times and your scores are still below where you want them to be, and there are no extenuating circumstances, and you've prepared really hard, then I would say you have to accept that your highest GMAT score is going to be your GMAT score and apply appropriately. Now, you may need to rethink some of your target programs to improve the chance that you will be accepted somewhere. In other words, if you have a dream school and your GMAT is, let's say it's 30 points below the average, you can still apply to your dream school, but also apply to programs where you are likely to be accepted and that support your goals with your existing GMAT score. This is particularly true if you're from an overrepresented group or if your grades are below average. Again, you don't have to throw out all your dreams or your dream schools, but do apply mostly to schools where you are competitive. Another option is to consider taking the GRE and see if you don't do better. Some people do better on GRE, some people do better on the GMAT. For most MBA programs, not all, but most, choose the test that you're going to do best on. If your grades are high and you can point to strong, rigorous coursework and demanding work experience to counteract the test score, yes, you can do that. And you should do that, especially for programs where your test scores are below average. But a low GMAT score is a particularly tough impediment to overcome because you can always retake it. And it's because of it's that common denominator for all of you. All right, congratulations, good work. You've been great admissions consultants. Now, here comes the contest, okay? The first 2 people with the right answer get a free 15-minute consultation from me, and you'll post your answer in the question window, please. Include a full answer to your response. Please don't break it into 2 components because it's going to have 2 components. Okay. What are 2 of the 3 key facts or elements that make the GMAT an important part of any MBA application? What are 2 of the 3 key facts or elements that make the GMAT an important part of any MBA application? Again, please put 2 in one box, because if you break it up, it's very hard for me to follow. Okay, we got, anybody else want to volunteer? Okay, I'm going to let Mubashir and Sanya, you got it. The 2 common elements are, no, GMAT is a constant between applicants and correlates the first-year success at school. That's for Mubashir and Sania. Okay, the 3 facts are, it is a constant. Everyone takes the same thing, and it makes it very easy for schools to compare you. 2, there's a high correlation to performance with a GMAT score and your performance in the first year of B school of your MBA programs. The 3rd is more of a reality than a fact. It's generally considered a measure of student quality when computed in school averages, and it definitely is a factor in leading rankings. And you can always retake it and raise it. It's not like your undergraduate GPA. Now, in addition, the GMAT plays several roles in addition to serving as a way to determine aptitude for top business schools. In that role, it can keep you out of business school, but it rarely gets you in. It is a factor in determining merit aid, and it can play a role in screening for plum positions in management consulting and investment banking after you graduate. In other words, when you're actually recruiting, both for internships and for full-time positions. The implications for applicants who are preparing to take or retake the GMAT. Prepare to do the best you can the first time out. If you don't get the score you want and think you can improve it, it almost always pays to prepare again and retake, especially the first or second time around. When you get above 3, I think the law of diminishing returns starts to set in. Even if retaking may mean that you need to apply to a later deadline. The overwhelming majority of schools evaluate you based on your highest GMAT score, and you're much better off applying later with a competitive GMAT or GRE score and a stronger application than earlier with a non-competitive score. At some point, if you can't raise your GMAT score, then I think the best option is to adjust your school choices. Again, you don't have to give up all your dream schools, but most of your schools that you're applying to should be programs that support your goals, your post-MBA goals, because the MBA is a means to an end, and based on the raw numbers, there's a reasonable chance of acceptance. If the other elements of your application are strong and your target programs accept the GRE, consider taking the GRE if the GMAT has just been a tough nut for you to crack. With the GRE, only the score of your choosing is reported, and while you're taking the test, you have the ability to go back and change answers. Plus, it's a little bit less expensive. The bottom line on the GRE versus GMAT is take the test, take and use the test you can do best on. Now, before I go into the closing part of the webinar and also open it up for Q&A, I'd like to ask you in the question window, please. Can you please share with me what was the most valuable concept, idea, or piece of advice you heard so far in today's webinar? What was the most valuable concept, idea, or piece of advice you heard so far in today's webinar? In the question window, please. Okay, the GMAT is integral, but not everything as it is supposed to be, as it is assumed to be by applicants. Good. The 3 facts about the GMAT. Thank you. Aim for 80th percentile in both quant and verbal. Good. Good. Anybody think about, find valuable the idea of using context in assessing the need to retake or just evaluating your GMAT yourself? Good, good. Both quant and verbal are equally important. Nobody liked that concept. That's one I think that is actually really important, but I'm glad that you folks found these concepts important. It determines the performance of one's first year in business school. It predicts it. Doesn't determine it, but it predicts it. Yes. Thank you, Paul. Anybody else? Okay. Now we're going to move on. Some of you probably now have clarity as to whether you should retake the GMAT. Oh, wait, one more? Yeah, okay. Yes, also how to assess the score and how it applies to the admissions process. Good, thank you. Good, well, most of you seem to have found something valuable in here. That's great. Some of you probably now have clarity as to whether you should retake the GMAT or not. Some of you are probably wondering how to apply to your situation the principles and examples I provided. And all of you are wondering how to proceed and submit your best application, an application that spotlights your strengths and fit with your target schools while showing you as a standout in the applicant pool. Accomplishing all the above, whether you retake and get the score you want or continue to struggle with a low test score, be it the GMAT or the GRE, is difficult, it's stressful, and it's time-consuming. And as we agreed at the beginning of the webinar, the process isn't about getting into business school or even about earning an MBA. We're talking about enhancing your professional future and maximizing your career opportunities over your professional life. That's something that we at Accepted constantly help our clients with, all the things I just mentioned, determining whether to retake, how to deal with a low test score, and how to maximize your application. Now, you're now at a crossroads on your professional journey. As you start your pursuit of the MBA, you can either, or continue it, since most of you have already started it by taking the GMAT, you can either take a do-it-yourself approach or a professional approach. Given that we're talking about your career, lifelong earnings, and job satisfaction, I highly recommend the professional approach and engagement with an Accepted consultant. We'd like to help you apply confidently and successfully. While you want to do this exactly once or once more, we've been helping MBA applicants get accepted for 25 years. We'd love to help you not only get accepted, but get into a program that launches you on your dream career trajectory. Put simply, it pays to have an experienced professional guiding you in this critical process and at this critical juncture. Here's what you can do when you work with Accepted. Access expertise and experience, reduce your stress, save time, optimize your school choices and application, learn how to mitigate weaknesses. And you have access to candor, a mentor, and objectivity combined with expertise and decades of experience in MBA admissions. Now, some may say Accepted is expensive, and we're definitely not a cheap service because of the quality of our staff. However, there are also expensive risks associated with not using Accepted. You could have to reapply, which can cost a couple $1,000s easily, and more if you have to retake the GMAT. You would have one additional year of pre-MBA earnings, and that can easily cost in the 5 figures. And then there's a potential that you could have gotten into a better program with lifelong higher earnings and network, and that could cost you in the 5 or 6 figures. Every year, we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected that they wanted to work with us this time around. They would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. But enough from me. What do accepted clients say? I'm going to excerpt from what you see on your screen. With an extremely low GMAT, below average GPA, and degrees from a low-ranked university, I am extremely blessed to be attending a top business school. My admission would not have happened without your guidance. Accepted to Duke. Well, the second testimonial on the right. I just wanted to give you the good news that I got into Stanford as well. I wanted to thank you for your help with the essays. It was invaluable. I'm now going to have a tough time deciding between Harvard and Stanford, but at least it's a nice problem to have. Here you go. Now, you heard from a couple of clients. One said that he or she had very low stats. We've helped people with entire applications. We've helped them just by spending an hour with them, giving them some advice on whether to retake or not to retake, how best to handle the low GMAT or GRE score. And we'd like you to do the same. If you look on your screen, you'll see 4 simple steps. Go to accepted.com/MBA answers, choose the service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, and then apply confidently and effectively. We're here to guide you and help you get accepted to the best MBA program for you. And now I'm happy to take your questions. Please post your questions. Now, one person has commented that our prices are expensive. And as I said, we're definitely not cheap. But in the context of MBA admissions, realize that if you apply ineffectively, you will spend multiples of a 1 hour consultation on your application fees, and you won't think twice about it. Our fees can save you a lot of money. And last I checked, the total amount of scholarship dollars that our clients earned was very close to our annual revenue. So we can also help you get some merit. We can't guarantee it, obviously, and that's not really our focus, but our clients do very well in terms of getting merit aid. Now, let's see what some of the questions are coming in. How important is a higher IELTS score to the US B schools? For most B schools, if you achieve their minimum, then they're happy, and a higher IELTS might give them a little bit more confident that you have the communication skills they're looking for, but it's not a major factor in the MBA admissions process. They're going to look more closely at your quant score, the quality of your essays, and also how you perform in an interview. But thank you for the question. Certainly won't hurt. Okay. Okay, Aditya, I asked quant 67, verbal 90, GMAT 710, target programs average 710, 3 years experience. Should I retake? Well, here's where context comes in. Okay, I'm guessing from your name that you're Indian. I don't know what you do. Do you have some unusual experiences, or are you a fairly undifferentiated member of the Indian male engineer cohort? Are your post-MBA goals highly quantitative? Have you had above average progression on the job? Is your work highly quantitative? Those would all play a role in my assessment. Is this the first time that you took the exam? Have you taken it before? How did you prepare? Based only on what you posted, my inclination would be to tell you to retake, especially if you only took it once. And given my assumption that you are an Indian male engineer and from an overrepresented group, I would encourage retake. But again, I have a lot of questions about context, and those are the kinds of things that we would address in a consultation. Okay, when you talk about overrepresented groups, does that mean people from certain professions or nationalities, i.e. Indian, Chinese, etc.? Also, are Pakistanis generally overrepresented as applicants to M7 schools? Overrepresented can be a matter of nationality, but it is definitely also professional groups. So there are a lot of management consultants and people in financial services applying to business school. There are a lot of engineers applying to business school. The Pakistanis as a group are not overrepresented in the applicant pool. But it's more than just the outside of your passport. It can be other things. And let's focus a little bit less on the overrepresented and think about how to differentiate yourself. It's every applicant's job to show that they are a group of one, that they are an individual, and that they're not just defined by their ethnicity or their profession. And I have a whole podcast on that, and we also have a diversity checklist that gives you ideas on how to do that as an individual. And again, that's something that we work with our clients. Very, very hard. I call it the 3 IDs of diversity. Rachel, can you post the link to the both the diversity checklist and the podcast where I talked about that? The 3 IDs of identity, of diversity rather, are identity, which would be your background, right? I'm Indian, I'm Chinese, I'm male, I'm female. That kind of whatever identity is important to you. Then there's the I dids, which are your achievements. Where have you contributed? Where have you made a difference? And then there's ideas. How is your perspective different? How do you contribute by virtue of your approach to situations and problems? So don't just focus on being from an overrepresented group. Every single applicant, I don't care what group you're from, some will have an easier time doing this than others, has to make themselves into a group of one, an individual. But really good question. Thank you. And we have another some good questions. You're very welcome, Mubashir. I apologize if I mispronounce names. What is the ideal percentile when applying to the M7 business school? You mean on the individual portions of the exam or total? On the total, I would look at the total scores. Harvard in particular is very good about revealing data on its accepted students. And you could use that as a proxy for the M7. Yes, I know that some of the M7 is a little bit lower, but they're all pretty much clustered up there the same way. There, just to be different, I would use the actual score. You can also look at our MBA selectivity index, and get a good idea of how the schools compare in terms of GMAT score, GPA, and acceptance rate, both in the M7 and outside the M7. And Rachel, could I ask you to post that link also? And have you ever helped applicants from Uzbekistan? How does it help to get accepted in terms of diversity? Yes, we actually have worked with clients from Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, all kinds of places around the world. That's one of the fascinating aspects of our job, my job, and the interactions our consultants enjoy. We've worked with applicants in different parts of Africa, Pakistan. Again, I just mentioned Uzbekistan. I think we have had a client from Syria, Iraq, Iran. So yes, Mongolia. We've worked with people from all over the world. How does it help to get accepted in terms of diversity? You know, we are all shaped by our upbringing. We're shaped by the languages that we speak. And the way you approach problems and situations and people, interpersonal relations, is going to vary a little bit based on where you were raised. So when you come from Uzbekistan, you're going to automatically bring somewhat of a different perspective to your classroom than somebody raised in Germany or the United States or India, just by virtue of the fact that you grew up in a different place. And that is how it helps in terms of diversity. Now, you may be asked questions about, more specific questions about how you're going to contribute to the diversity of your class, and then you're going to have to figure out in more concrete ways than I can, how your being from Uzbekistan makes your approach to interpersonal situations, problems, and business a little different from mine, raised in Los Angeles in the United States, and also significantly older, raised at a different time. Okay. And an excellent question, though. Thank you for it, Sardar. And any other questions? All right. In that case, I want to thank you for attending and participating. Thank you for your questions, your answers, your time, and your attention. You've been a wonderful audience. I have a final story and one final thought. And I'm going to start with the thought. The thought, the GMAT or GRE are an important element in your application, but not the only important element. Definitely up there. We've gone through that very thoroughly, I know, but not the only one. There are also the essays, your resume, possibly a video, possibly a short answer question, optional essays, and of course, an interview. All these are in your control at this point in time. Make them the best they can be with our help. And now the story. An applicant came to us with a GMAT 40 to 50 points below the GMAT average for his elite MBA program. I believe it was an M7. He was stressed and not sure if he should even try. Here's what, actually, I don't think it was. Yeah, I think it was. Here's what he wrote us. Just to jog your mind, you helped me apply to 7 schools in the USA, including Haas, Kellogg, and Fuqua. I was invited to interview with every school that I applied to, despite my low GMAT of only 660. Now the results have started coming out, and so far I've been admitted to Tuck and Fuqua. There is no way I would have been successful without your invaluable edits and mock interviews. I owe the success to you, Jennifer. Oh, and by the way, the resume you did for me has earned me an interview with McKinsey. He was also later admitted to Haas with a large scholarship and Ross, so he was ultimately accepted to 5 out of 7 schools. Now this applicant, someone just like you, accessed the guidance he needed to overcome his low GMAT score. Working with Accepted, he also brought out his strengths and distinctive qualities and ultimately showed that he belongs at not just 1, but 5 top MBA programs. He got into 5 great MBA programs with Accepted's help. So can you. Get accepted. Thanks again for coming.